woke to the smell of something wrong. Not just burnt toast or overdone dough. Something darker, bitter, thick, and hot. It curled into my nose like a whispered threat. I blinked at the ceiling above. Familiar wooden beams. But the air wasn't right. It didn't hug. It pressed.
Somewhere below, something shifted. The floor was warm. Too warm. My breath caught in my throat. The scent had changed. It wasn't just smoke. It was wood, flour, fabric, all melting into one slow, choking perfume. I sat up. The dark glowed. Orange light pulsed between the floorboards, thin as hair and just as alive. I leaned closer. It flickered like a creature pacing the low. The silence was worse than noise. No crackle. No roar. Just pressure. As if the fire was waiting, listening. I whispered, "Father?" No reply. Just my sister snoring beside me and the low hum of danger. I moved toward the edge of the loft. Below, flames licked the bakery shelves. One sack of flour burst, like a cloud of snow catching fire. Beautiful. Horrific. The door was open. Not a crack, open. Like someone invited the fire out for a stroll, and it accepted. The flames stretched into the street with ease, slipping over cobblestones like oil. I watched it go, too stunned to move. That was the moment I realized something simple and terrible. London didn't catch fire. It let it in. And we were first to greet it. We thought escaping the bakery meant survival. But that was just the prologue. The fire hadn't even started telling its story yet. We ran. Not fast, not heroic. Just clumsy, barefoot, half asleep. The kind of run that hurts your knees and makes you question your life choices. My sister tripped on her own nightgown. I pulled her up. The alley behind our bakery was glowing. The sky above London wasn't black. It was orange. An awful, swirling orange, as if God had spilled paint all over the stars. Sparks danced like angry fairies in the wind. They weren't cute. One landed on my arm. It hissed. I hissed back.
We made it to Thames Street. Crowds had started to gather, half-dressed, wide-eyed, clutching chickens, frying pans, and in one case, a portrait of King Charles. I envied him. The man looked calm in oils. We looked like melting wax.
I shouted to no one. "Is this the end?" Some guy next to me said, "It's Sunday." He looked very sure of that. Very unhelpful, but sure. The river itself shimmered, black ink reflecting a city on fire. Boats rocked in panic. A barrel rolled past us, cracked open and leaking wine. Somewhere, a man wept over it. "It was my best barrel," he moaned. I nearly joined him. Horses screamed. Carriages jammed the street. People yelled names I'd never heard before. Eliza. Thaddeus. Mittens. I hoped Mittens was a cat. I hoped Eliza was not. A priest stood on a barrel and screamed, "Judgment." A baker yelled. It was an oven accident. And I just stood there, in my nightshirt, covered in soot, wondering if bread was ever worth this much chaos. My sister tugged my hand. "The fire's chasing us," she said. She wasn't wrong. Behind us, rooftops collapsed like books being closed. Each thud was a chapter ending, and London wasn't halfway through its story. We didn't know where we were going. Only that forward was better than behind, and the city was just beginning to scream. We passed St. Magnus Church just as its bell gave out a long, tired groan. Not a chime, not a call to prayer, more like a sigh, like even the church had seen enough. Its roof was smoking. Its steeple glowed. Faith was flammable, apparently. The fire wasn't chaotic. That's what terrified me. It was methodical. It didn't leap. It climbed. It tasted. It chose. Like it had a map. Like it had a plan. It crept along roofs like a spy. Then it dropped, through windows, down beams, into kitchens. It ate slowly at first, then hungrily, like it remembered it hadn't had breakfast. A man shouted at it, literally stood in front of his house and yelled, "You can't take my home." The fire disagreed. His roof collapsed politely. By the time we reached the next block, the flames had gotten smarter. They were skipping stone to stone, wood to wood, as if London had been paved with kindling. Spoiler, it kind of was. We passed a woman throwing tea at the blaze. A man smacked it with his coat. Two drunkards were debating whether beer would help. I didn't have the heart to tell them. No one has ever drowned fire in ale. Constable shouted, "Form a line. Bucket chain." We tried, but the buckets were too few, the water too little, the fear too much. I tried not to look back, but the sound made me do it. It wasn't the fire anymore. It was the city groaning, groaning like an old man sitting down too fast. We kept moving, because if we stood still long enough, London would rewrite us into ash. By midday, the streets stopped being streets. They became puzzles. Smoke blocked the alleys. Ash blanketed the signs. Every corner looked the same, red, gray, and scared. We took a turn near Milk Street and ended up on Bread Street. No milk, no bread, just names mocking us. London's irony never slept. I tried to lead, pretend I knew where I was going. But the truth is, the city had changed shape. The buildings weren't buildings anymore. They were torches with doors. My sister clung to my sleeve. She kept whispering, "Are we safe now?" And I kept lying, with increasing confidence, because lies feel warmer when everything else is burning. A man staggered past with a wheelbarrow of spoons. Spoons. He nodded solemnly, like he'd saved the crown jewels. Another ran by with a goat under one arm. I didn't ask. A child asked me where his parents were. I told him they were ahead of us. He nodded and walked faster. I never said which direction was ahead. Someone screamed, "North." Another shouted, "To the river." A third yelled, "Find the king." We chose not here and hoped for the best. Smoke started to taste like metal, like someone had melted a coin and poured it into my lungs. Breathing became a job, a hard, unpaid one, with no holidays. And still we walked, because sometimes movement feels like hope, even if all you're walking through is the end of your home. We reached the river like it was a finish line, but it didn't cheer. It didn't care. The Thames just sat there, wide, black, and slightly annoyed. Boats crowded its banks like rats on driftwood. People were piling onto anything that floated. Some fought for ferries. Others clung to barrels or crates. One man tried to surf on a door. He was not successful. I asked a soldier, "Is there room?" He laughed, sighed, only for the important. I glanced at my soot-covered face and nightshirt. Apparently, I was not important. Nearby, a preacher knelt by the water, yelling prayers. Next to him, a boy was fishing. Same river, two kinds of faith. We sat near the edge, not talking, just watching London blur into smoke and orange. A woman handed me a biscuit. It tasted like sand and panic, but I ate it anyway. A nobleman shouted at a boatman, waving gold coins. The boatman waved back with a paddle and rowed away. Not everyone could be bought, at least not today. My sister pointed upriver. The fire was coming, not quickly, but steadily. It was like watching someone walk toward you with a knife, smiling. I thought about jumping in, letting the river take me, but the Thames was cold and filled with old shoes, and I wasn't ready to drown next to someone else's boot. So we stayed, because we had nowhere else. And sometimes the river isn't an escape. It's just another place to wait. Night didn't fall. It sank, slowly, heavily, like a cathedral crumbling into itself. And we didn't sleep. We just stopped moving. The ground was still warm, not from sun, from fire. It felt like sleeping on grief. Ash stuck to our skin like old shame. A woman next to me hummed an old nursery tune, not for comfort, for memory. Because when your house is gone, songs become walls. Someone tried to joke. At least we're all closer now. No one laughed, but no one got angry either. That was the scariest part. I wrapped myself in a curtain I stole from a half-burned inn. It still smelled like ale and dust. Familiar, almost kind, better than the priest's breath earlier. In the distance, the fire still growled. It wasn't roaring anymore, just simmering, like it was thinking about what it had done. Children slept without blankets, dogs without names. Even the rats moved slower, unsure if the city was still theirs. We took turns watching the glow on the horizon, not because we could stop it, but because it felt rude to look away. My legs had forgotten what clean floors felt like, and my fingers, they held onto soot like it was something holy. It wasn't, but it was all we had. Next to me, a boy whispered, "Do you think God's asleep?" I didn't answer. I didn't want to know what waking up would look like. Somewhere nearby, a cow mooed. We all turned. The sound was too alive, too hopeful. No one moved. It passed. I closed my eyes, but dreams didn't come. Only memories. And even they kept coughing. Someone started to cry, soft, like leaves falling on a coffin. A man handed her a crust of bread. She took it like it was a crown. The sky above was clear. Stars blinked, unaware. I hated them for their peace. By dawn, we were still there, not asleep, not awake, just still ... And somewhere behind the ashes, the next nightmare stirred. They say Parliament didn't burn, that while our roofs collapsed, while fathers dragged the charred beams of childhood homes from the street, the great chamber stood, cool, intact, lit by candlelight and silence. I wasn't invited, of course. No one knocks on your door when you've spent the night under rubble. But I found a wall with a crack, a window barely open, and through it, I heard comfort. Chairs, polished floors, gentle coughing. They were dressed in powdered wigs and ivory smiles. Not a single ember on their sleeves. Some still smelled faintly of perfume. Or maybe I just imagined that, because outside we all stank of wet ash and fear. We must rebuild quickly, one said. Trade will suffer, another added. A third, with fingers like dried quills, tapped a scroll. This is a chance to finally clear the slums. Clear, like we were fog on their windows. Like our lives were soot, they could wipe away with a cloth and a budget. They argued about tax levies. They debated how much stone costs per square foot. One gentleman proposed wider streets. Fire breaks, he said, but the way he smiled. I think he just hated how close our houses had been to his ... No one mentioned the screams. No one said anything about the woman I saw with no shoes, dragging a bucket of water that had turned to steam before she arrived. No one remembered the man who lit his last candle, not to see, but so his dying mother could feel light one more time. They toasted ... to progress, to the future, to necessary cleansing. I pressed my ear harder to the wall. I wanted to burst in, hold up the bones of the neighbor's dog, ask if this counted as progress too. One man coughed, sighed, "The king will approve this. London reborn." I thought of my sister, who burned with her violin in her arms. She used to say rebirth was beautiful. I hope she was right. By the time they adjourned, we had already buried 24 strangers together. No names, just a hole and a prayer. They stepped into carriages, velvet curtains, horses that hadn't seen smoke. I followed one as far as the city gate. Then I turned back. The ashes were still warm. Someone had to stay. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if the fire had reached Parliament. Would they have still spoken of urban opportunity? Would they have still smiled as the ceiling cracked above their powdered heads? But it didn't, and maybe that's the greatest trick fire ever played, knowing exactly who to spare and why. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe a dream. But no, this was real, too steady, too precise, too alive. A bell was ringing, somewhere in the ashes ... I stepped over rubble and scorched wood. Every footfall was silent, like the ground was holding its breath. Only the bell made sound. Its chime floated in the air, thin and high, like a memory. When I turned onto Church Street, the smoke thinned just enough, and I saw him, a boy, barely 10, no shoes, a backward shirt, but eyes like he'd already said too many goodbyes. He was pulling the bell rope, over and over, his arms trembling with effort, his lips dry, but he didn't stop, and neither did the sound. When he looked up, we made eye contact, but he didn't really see me. He looked through me, like I was just another ghost. Maybe I was. There were no prayers left in this city, only smoke and silence. But the bell, it wasn't a prayer. It was a refusal, a whisper that said, "I'm still here." An old woman passed by without looking at the boy. She carried a melted candle, something salvaged from a broken chapel. She was part of another ritual now, the kind you do for no one in particular. The windows had eyes, tired ones, watching, but not moving. Everyone heard the bell. No one came out, because every sound reminded them of something they'd rather forget. Suddenly, the boy paused. He let the rope fall. The bell went quiet. Then, without warning, he pulled again, slower this time, like exhaling your last breath. A man showed up, stood, watched, muttered something, walked away. That was the pattern now. Appear, witness, leave. But no one stopped the bell. The clouds thinned, sunlight cracked through like a guilty conscience, and the bell cast a long, shaky shadow. Even shadows trembled here. The bell didn't feel like metal anymore. It felt like memory, heavy, unforgiving, a witness no one could silence. The boy never spoke. He didn't need to. Each ring was a sentence, a cry in a language only ashes understood. I just listened. Rain came, not soft, not cleansing, just cold. It made the rope heavier, made the boy smaller. Still, he pulled. Eventually, I turned away, but the sound followed me, not just in my ears, in my bones. Some bells don't stop ringing, even after they go silent. The bell was still echoing behind me. Even as my feet led me away, my ribs carried the rhythm. But something else called me now. Not sound, smell, old paper, hot ink, the scent of knowledge burning. The city archive stood half collapsed at the edge of the square, its stone facade blackened. A marble lion out front was missing half its jaw. Even the statues had started surrendering. I shouldn't have gone inside, but history has a voice, and sometimes it screams, especially when no one's listening. The lobby was flooded, not with water, but ash. It covered the floor like snow in morning. Each footprint I made felt like I was stepping on time itself. The shelves were still there. Most were scorched. Some had collapsed, but others stood like tired librarians, still trying to hold it all together. A page fluttered down from above. It landed near my foot, part of a census. Names, ages, occupations. I stared at it like it might whisper its secrets if I was quiet enough. A second page drifted down, this one handwritten. A letter, maybe. Dear Mother. It stopped there. The rest had burned away, just like the sender. I walked deeper. The hallway narrowed. Shelves leaned against each other like wounded soldiers. Glass cases cracked and melted. History liquefied. In the back corner, I found a door, charred but intact. Behind it, the restricted archive. The secrets we didn't want remembered. The ones we stored just in case. It was cooler in there, almost untouched. Somehow, this room had survived. The only sound was my breathing, and a faint dripping, like the building itself was bleeding from somewhere unseen. I found a ledger, thick, heavy, still warm. Flipping through, I saw numbers, codes, shipments, relocation records. Except these relocations had no return addresses. I sat on the floor, surrounded by silence, surrounded by truth. It wasn't traumatic, just heavy, like learning a family secret too late to do anything but carry it. I wanted to save something. One book, one scroll, one fact. But everything felt glued to the place, like it belonged to the fire now, and I'd be stealing from it. As I stood up, something cracked behind me. Not wood, bone. I turned, and there he was. A man in the shadows, dressed like a clerk, eyes like a grave. He didn't speak, just looked at me and nodded, like he'd been waiting for someone to understand what must never be written again. The upper deck was quieter now. Smoke still traced the horizon, but my ears ached for silence. Instead, I heard something worse. Quill on parchment. A man writing calmly, rhythmically, as if the world around him wasn't rotting. He wore a coat, once white, now somewhere between storm gray and dried blood. His hands were gloved, but not for hygiene. Just decency, the kind you wear like a lie. They called him Doctor. I'm not sure what he called himself. Maybe he didn't need names, just numbers, weights, vital signs, asset value. His table was covered in ink pots and vials. Beside it, a bucket. What was once in the bucket is still unknown to me. But the smell? It had stories, most of them tragic. I stood across from him. He didn't look up, just turned a page, dipped his quill, and said, "Next." I didn't step forward. Someone else did. A boy, younger than me, ribs visible, voice gone. He blinked like the sun had betrayed him once, and he never forgot. The doctor tapped the boy's chest, checked his teeth, lifted his eyelid, each movement sharp, clinical, like measuring livestock or fixing a clock. Except this clock bled. "Good lungs," he muttered, then jotted a code. A 3-letter abbreviation I didn't understand, but I felt it, like a branding iron to the soul. Behind him, shelves held more than medicine, bundles of herbs. Yes, but also collars, chains, and tiny bones, labeled like specimens, history pressed into jars. He turned to me then. At last, his eyes didn't see me. They scanned me, judged me by circumference, by utility, by survivability. "Your name?" he asked. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I had swallowed it weeks ago, maybe months, in the dark, where names didn't matter anymore. He wrote mute, then paused, then added a question mark, like my silence was a flaw in the system, not the system itself. I glanced at his ledger. Each line was a life, abbreviated, sanitized, sanctioned. This wasn't medicine. This was mathematics with flesh. Then he looked past me. Another patient. Another measurement. Another moment forgotten by the hour it was written. And just like that, I became a number 2. A nameless mark on a page. Not worth curing, only worth calculating. And the ledger kept growing. It began with thunder. Not the kind that rumbles politely from far away, but the kind that punches the sea, that tears clouds in half like parchment, and makes grown men speak to gods they no longer believe in. We were lashed to the deck, not metaphorically, literally. Ropes biting our wrists, salt biting our eyes, wind biting what was left of hope. The priest was a man named Elias. They called him Padre. He wasn't a man of the cloth anymore. He was a man of soaked linen and broken Latin. He stood with his arms raised, not in prayer, but in defiance. The rain made him shine like a statue no one prayed to anymore. God sees you, he shouted over the wind. A wave responded by slapping the words from his mouth. He laughed, then screamed again, even now. Some cried, some cursed. Some clenched their teeth so hard, their gums bled. I just watched the sky and wondered if it was watching back. Lightning cracked, not far, right above. For a moment, the world became silver. Faces frozen in fear, hands reaching, chains rattling like metallic prayer beads. Repent, Elias bellowed. To whom? Someone shouted back. No answer came, only thunder. He kept preaching, a sermon of salt and fury, about sins we didn't remember committing, and mercy we'd never met. Rain cooled in the grooves of the deck. Blood joined it. Someone had slipped, skull on wood, still breathing. For now, the priest knelt beside the boy. Didn't ask for his name. Didn't ask what hurt. Just touched his forehead and whispered something that wasn't in Latin. Wasn't in any language I knew. But it felt like a goodbye. The storm answered, with wind that howled, with sails that tore like paper, with a mast that cracked at its spine. When morning came, Elias was still on the deck, eyes closed, arms spread, like a man crucified by weather. They found him smiling, dead, smiling. Some say the storm passed, but I think it just moved inside us and stayed there, quiet, waiting for the next sermon. Below deck, in the darkest corridor, where even rats hesitated to go, a quiet commerce took place, not with coins, not with trade goods, but with whispers. It was after midnight, the kind of hour where you forget what time is. The only light was a crack in the boards, where the moon spilled in like a thief. And under that faint silver, eyes met eyes. Old women, boys barely walking, men with backs like broken hills. All of them shifted closer. No one spoke loudly. You didn't barter here. You confessed. Salt water boiled my brother's skin. She hid a necklace under her tongue. Don't eat the green bread. Each truth passed like smoke. Brief, poisonous, necessary. One man claimed he could read the stars. Another claimed he could talk to sharks. Both were probably lying. But in that place, a good lie was worth more than any truth. I sat near a wooden beam carved with initials. One set was crossed out. Underneath it, scratched deeper, a single word. Freedom. Hope had handwriting down here. A girl offered me a pebble, flat, round, warm from her palm. Swallow it, she said. If they find it, they'll think it's nothing. But it remembers where it came from.
I asked what she meant. She just smiled. Not the kind of smile for jokes, the kind for funerals, the kind that says, I'll forget my name before I forget my land.
Somebody started humming, low, tired, ancient. It wasn't a song. It was a memory wearing music's mask. And in that rhythm, people began to trade again. Not items, but presence. A nod, a glance, a shoulder leaned too close. It was all we had. Suddenly, a thud, footsteps above. Whispers died instantly. The market vanished. Like smoke, like dreams, like names. I swallowed the pebble. It tasted like nothing, but it felt like rebellion. Sleep came slowly that night, not because of fear, because I had too much to remember. And down there, forgetting was the worst kind of death. Land, but not salvation, only interruption. A bruise on the ocean skin. We called it an island. They called it inventory. The shouting started before we saw it. A new kind of noise. Sharp, rhythmic, military. The crew had changed tone. No more curses, no more games. Just precision. It meant we were close. Not to home, to something worse. From the deck, I saw it. A dark smear in the blue. The island didn't look like much. Some trees. A dock. A warehouse with no windows. But the air around it felt like teeth. They called out numbers. We weren't names here. We were entries in a ledger. I was Unit 5 male, upper body intact, eyes responsive. That's all. That's all I was. We were unloaded like cargo, slaves, spices, and sugar, all priced by weight, condition, and future yield. The dock smelled of wet wood, urine, and something sweeter. Rum, even hell is scented. We passed through gates taller than memory, and beyond them, a courtyard of sorting, pale men with hats and clipboards, thick pens, thin eyes. They didn't speak to us ... only about us ... Mark that one, strong legs. Watch the girl, she bites. Check teeth, always teeth, like we were horses. Badly behaved ones. Then came the renaming. It wasn't official. No scrolls. No ceremonies. Just a guard with a thick accent saying, You're Toby now. Toby. I had never been a Toby. Some refused. One man, old, gray in the beard, said, My name is Sefu. He said it proudly. Sefu. It sounded like thunder wrapped in silk. They broke his jaw. After that, names became a thing we whispered, like contraband. I wrote mine in my mind every night, as if thinking it enough times might protect it, as if names were armor. They weren't, but still I wore it. They brought us to holding pens, yes, pens, like cattle, but even cattle don't weep in their sleep. One boy kept whispering home. That's all he said. Home, home, as if the word would grow legs and carry him away. It didn't. It just echoed. We stayed there 3 days, or 30. Time melted in that place. Melted into a slow drip of hunger, sweat, and waiting. They fed us rice, unwashed, cold, sometimes alive. Water tasted like metal. One sip and you understood the word mercy, because you weren't getting any. On the 4th morning, trumpets. Not for us, ... for the buyers. We were about to be displayed, not as people, as promises. They made us stand, one by one, naked, oiled, labeled with numbers like wine, but cheaper, much cheaper. Unless you had all your teeth, then maybe you were fine stock. The auctioneer had a voice like gravel and sugar, smooth for the rich, rough for the rest. He joked, laughed, made a spectacle of it. Get your prize, young, strong, and barely screams. The crowd chuckled. I did not. They made me turn around, flex, open my mouth. They poked at my ribs and said things I didn't understand. But I understood the look. The look said, How long will he last? One woman asked if I could play music. They handed me a drum. My hands trembled, but the rhythm remembered me. I played. She didn't buy me, but she clapped. Strange, what applause can mean in a place like this. They auctioned a boy before me. He smiled. I don't know why. Maybe he was just confused. Or maybe he thought smiling would make them like him. It did. He sold quickly. A girl refused to stand. She sat cross-legged, arms folded. They dragged her by the hair. The crowd murmured. The auctioneer shrugged. Temperamental, he said. Her price dropped. Her value never existed to them. When it was my turn, I looked at no one. I stared at the ground. It looked like every other ground. Dust, blood, some seeds that never had a chance to grow. I sold for the same price as a wheelbarrow, slightly less than a donkey, more than a bucket of nails. That's the math of it. Human, donkey, nails. The buyer didn't speak. He just handed over coins and pointed. A guard nudged me forward. Ownership changed hands. No paper. No ceremony. Just a nod. And just like that, I was gone. Not the body, but everything that made it more than a thing. As we walked away, I looked back. Another group was lining up. They were younger. Some still had milk teeth. The auctioneer winked. The cycle didn't even pause. I asked another man quietly, "Where are we going?" He said, "To the fields." I asked, "What do we do there?" He said, "You die slowly." I wanted to scream, but my voice had been auctioned too. So I walked ... with new chains. Not made of iron this time, but made of names I would never choose, and days I would never own. We walked single file, through scrubland that cracked underfoot. The sun wasn't shining. It was watching, judging, waiting to see who would fall next. The overseer didn't carry a whip. He didn't need to. His silence was enough. You learn to fear footsteps behind you, even if they're soft. A man ahead of me collapsed. He didn't groan, didn't cry. He just folded like parchment in the wind. 2 guards dragged him to the side. No one spoke. No one asked, because we all knew the answer. He'd been erased from the list, if there ever was a list. They gave us water. Once, it tasted like old wood and warnings. I drank slowly, like the cup had teeth. A woman behind me sang, low and breathless, something about rivers and memory. The guards let her sing. Maybe they liked the sound. Maybe they thought it was morning. It was both. By noon, our shadows were under our feet. We became shorter than ourselves. Ghosts on pause. I counted each step. Every 100 was a prayer. Every 1,000, a loss. I lost count somewhere around 10,000. Or maybe I lost part of myself. At one point, we passed a tree. It was alone. Bent, half dead, but standing. One man reached out and touched it. Just one fingertip, like it was sacred, or remembered something he'd forgotten. He was struck for it, but I think it was worth it. We walked through a village. Children stared. Some laughed. One boy threw a stone. It missed, but it still hurt. I caught a glimpse of myself in a window. I looked like someone else, or maybe everyone else. Dust-covered, eyes hollowed by repetition. They told us we were almost there. They always said that. It was never true, but I wanted to believe it. Hope can be a drug, and withdrawal is fatal. Night came, and we stopped. Not because they were kind, because the road wasn't lit. Darkness is the only mercy in this world. You can't see the suffering. Just hear it. Just feel it press against your skin like a wet cloth. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I traveled elsewhere, to a time that didn't exist, to a place I'd never reach. And when morning came, the march continued, because it always did. We were led into rows, not planted positioned, like we were tools with lungs. The field stretched far enough to swallow names. Every direction looked the same: green, brown, hope-colored lies. My hands didn't know what to do at first. They hesitated, as if they still remembered writing, or touching, or belonging to me. Then they learned, fast. The hoe was heavier than shame. The sun stabbed at our backs, and still no words. Just breath, just sweat, just dirt and commands barked like coughs. One man hummed. It was almost a tune, until someone shouted, "No songs, not here, not anymore." And so it died. I tried to count the hours, but the day wasn't made of time. It was made of repetitions, of movements that looped like madness, over and over, until I forgot why I had ever stopped moving before. Someone collapsed. The others didn't look. That's how you survive. You don't notice things. You become the blade, not the wound. My back ached like it was being rewritten. Each crack a new sentence. The story wasn't mine, but I had to carry it. We paused for food, if you could call it that. A crust of something. A bowl of what might once have been broth. No one chewed. We swallowed like it was medicine. At one point, I saw a butterfly. Its wings were torn, but it flew anyway. I stared at it too long. A guard noticed. He didn't hit me ... He just whispered, "That's not for you." Someone tried to run. They didn't get far. They never do. We didn't speak of it, didn't whisper his name, because memory is dangerous. It makes you human. By dusk, the field had changed color. Gold, red, then gray, like even the sky had stopped caring. As we were herded back toward our quarters, I stepped in something soft, a patch of wildflowers, tiny, defiant, growing anyway. And for 1 second, just one, I smiled. Then I remembered where I was, and the smile fled. I woke to the sound of metal, not sharp dull, chains perhaps, or maybe just the memory of them ... No one spoke. Voices had weight now, and none of us could afford the burden. A name was called, then another. Not mine, not yet. Each name fell like a verdict. We didn't look at the chosen. Looking was dangerous. It implied connection. They were lined up ... 20 ... maybe 30. It didn't matter. What mattered was the cart. Wheels like circles of fate. Wood groaning like it regretted its role. One of them looked back, just once, eyes full of questions no one would answer, and then he stepped forward. I stayed seated, knees pulled to chest, arms around legs, a position that felt like safety once, as a child. Now it just felt like waiting. The cart rolled ... and as it moved, it sang, not a real song, just the creak and grind of inevitability. Someone wept, softly, not for themselves, not even for the departed, for the idea of tomorrow. I felt something strange, not hope, not quite, just breath, in, out. I was still here, and somehow, that felt like defiance. The sun rose, and we were still in its shadow, not free, not broken, just unfinished. And maybe that's the cruelest mercy of all, that history never really ends. It just forgets to stop.